Good evening, everyone. I'm Wendell Jones, and welcome to this special edition of the program, Jones and Company. On this program today, we are speaking with the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the Right Honorable Perry G. Christie. Mr. Christie is the most successful politician of his generation, having served in the Parliament of the Bahamas for some 40 years. He has been Minister of Health, Minister of Tourism, Minister of Agriculture, and of course, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance on two separate occasions. He is now in his second term as the Prime Minister of the Bahamas. There have been many achievements under the name of Perry G. Christie, and today on our program we are going to discuss a little bit about his 40 years in government, and we are also going to talk about the year that was and this 2015. And by the way, we wish all of you a Happy New Year. Prime Minister, Happy New Year to you.
Same to you, Mr. Jones, and a Happy New Year to the people of the Bahamas.
Thank you. Prime Minister, let's look at your 40 years in politics in the Bahamas. When you were a law student in London, did you ever think that you would be Prime Minister of the Bahamas?
You know, when we left the Bahamas in 1963, there was a group of us who left to go abroad, either to United Kingdom, Canada, United States, and we all aspired to come back to help bring about what we knew to be majority rule. It happened before we finished school, but we followed it. I had the opportunity with Dr. Nottage to form something called UNICOL, where we brought students together, Frankie Wilson, Emmerich Knowles, the rest of us, from the different universities we were at. We would come home in the summer, we would meet, we would talk about what we would do, we would bring in political figures and have them speak to us, but all with a view to fomenting political change. And so for me, I've had a wonderful time, but I have to answer and say, I did not think at the time that I would be Prime Minister. That came later on as I won elections and won a second and a third. Then I knew that people liked me and that I could go all the way in public life.
But you also knew that you would one day be involved in politics.
There's no doubt about it. From a child, I aspired to, I really looked at political figures, Cecil Wallace Whitfield, Orville Rehnquist, Arthur Folkes. These people led me, I think, at an early stage to like politics, to be intrigued by politics. And I remember as a youngster being taken by Ed Moxey, and Sinclair Oughton to the National Committee for Positive Action meetings, NCPA meetings. And I would sit in the back of the room at St. George's Hall or St. Agnes Hall, wherever they were meeting, and I would listen to the older men speak of politics and speak of political change. And I was the youngest member, and really wasn't a member, the youngest person there. And I thought that helped me to mature my views, my aspirations, and I knew then that politics was for me. I loved to see the lawyers in courts. My father took me once. I saw Orville Rehnquist prosecuting and Paul Adley defending in the criminal courts, and the ostentatious flair that I saw there, the articulation, the eloquence inspired me to want to be a lawyer. And so the two went together. One, I studied law. Two, I became a debater at university. And three, Sir Lyndon Pilling at the right stage offered me a seat in Parliament. I accepted and I won.
You were offered a Senate appointment at the age of 30, I believe. And from time to time I hear you talk about your high school days, and sometimes I believe that you understate your capacity. You have understated your erudition and your ability to manipulate the language in academia.
Well, I don't know if I understate, but the fact of the matter is I've had an extraordinary past. As a youngster, I showed that I was smart enough to pass on a competitive basis for the government high school. But also as a youngster, I had some form of attention deficit. I wasn't paying attention to the classes, or I repeated a class. And then by the rules of the school, eventually I was put out of the school on the basis that they said I should go to a trade. And Donald Davis took me in hand, told my parents that's nonsense. Later on, Headmaster H.M. Davies of Government High School asked me to come back because he'd reviewed the records and he thought they'd made a mistake. But by then I had taken O-levels from night school past O-levels. And I was telling my parents, send me to England because I think I could succeed. And I went to England, got a place at university in England. And when I went to England, my contemporaries like Bernard Nottage and Dwight Glover and Eddie Bailey, they were going to England into university. I was going to do A-levels and some O-levels. And I just compressed everything into a short period of time, passed the exams, I suppose demonstrated I had some ability in doing so. And then I went to university and I won the first year debating competition at university, in a huge university in England. And that spoke volumes. It gave me the confidence to know that I was going to be able to be successful in life if I employed what the lessons I had learnt, the disappointment, getting back up, not giving in, not giving up, and just really measuring myself on my ability to move forward and forget what had happened in the past, but use it almost as a catalyst for my development. And so I use that as a story to young people, as a story to parents, that you may have a bad time initially, but you must not give up, that you're measured really on your capacity to keep on trying to be the best you can. And sometimes it takes longer than the next person. So never give up. Yes. Have confidence.
You've never lost an election, and you ran for the same seat, I believe, for your entire political career. But you, I'm sure, had some low points and some high points.
Yeah, you know, you learn very quickly in politics that people have to like you. And so naturally, I think I was a likable kind of person by my demeanor, by my nature, by my outreach, my own personality as such. And then it helped to have been an athlete, to be a jungle. So that meant you could cast a wide circle with your friends and your friendship. Then you had parents. My parents were sort of defining figures in the valley, in that area that I came from, and they were the initial settlers in that area, and so people respected them. And even when people were of the opposite politics, they respected my parents. They knew I was a part of that, and therefore, even though they were not going to vote for me, I always described the valley as being, people might not support you, but they'll take you and put you in your bed if you fall down before their house. In other words, you're part of the family, but when it comes to the elections, we're going to disagree. But I think it's my likability that people came to know about me. People came after people like you. They get to know you. When they get to know you, they get to see that you're smart, that you believe in some things. And so I've been able to take into my political life my personality, my background, my own experiences, which were up and down in terms of life. And therefore, my whole life, I think, reflects the sort of ups and downs of people who are living there, who are young married couples or single mothers who aspired for their children to be the best they can. They saw in me many things that they could point to their children as being something they should emulate.
You know, many students of politics will remember that you ran as an independent after you had some difficulty in the Progressive Liberal Party in 1984. Would you think that that is one of the low points in your political career, or how do you measure that?
Well, you know, the elections was 1987, and,
yes.
And it was the most interesting point in my life because in those elections, the FNM had taken a position that they would not put a candidate against Hubert Ingram and Perry Christie, and they would not run a candidate against A.D. Hanna. And you know, when Hubert and I were fired, A.D. Hanna came to our side.
Yes, that was 84.
Yeah,
when you were fired.
We were fired in 84. And so we had this period going into 87 where the party decided to name candidates to run against Hubert and myself, but not to run against A.D. Hanna. And it was one of the most wonderful campaigns I could ever expect to be in, because people of the Valley came together in my area, and so you could go and look at my political headquarters and see Father Dudley Strawn sitting there playing checkers, and someone who ordinarily wouldn't get involved. But the underdog nature of my campaign brought all of them together to help in it. And so, I think what was noteworthy for me about running as an independent, I always knew I would want to be a PLP in the mainstream. And I never took steps that would be contrary to the ethic and the rules of the game, so to speak. I stayed within the confines of the rules of the game. And so it wasn't difficult for Lyndon Pindling to come back to me and offer me a place in the government, because it's something my wife and I decided that that's what we were going to do. We were going to remain PLP. Even when we were independent leaning PLP. And Hubert, when he made his decision, went one way, we went the other way.
That relationship between you and Sir Lyndon Pindling, that was almost a father-son relationship, it seemed. He handpicked you, I believe, in his waning days in politics, when he really wanted to give up the leadership of the Progressive Liberal Party, didn't he?
I think to a great extent, Sir Lyndon saw in me someone who he would wish to replace him. That would explain why he worked so hard to see to it that I would win in the competition within the party, that I would, I think he saw in me someone who would bring the qualities he would like to see to the leadership of the Progressive Liberal Party. And I really will always treasure the moments when he was on one of the campaigns for the leadership, when he stood outside the door with his cane. He was clearly sick. He was now, we know, clearly dying. But he was making a statement in support of my leadership that he wanted me to be the leader, and he wanted every single PLP who was voting to see that he supported me in that leadership. I've never forgotten that, and I'm in so many different ways. I've tried to live up to what he saw in me in terms of my leadership of the Progressive Liberal Party.
How are you, as a leader and Prime Minister, different from Sir Lyndon Pindling? Many people say that there aren't any politicians who can step in his shoe. He was the father of the nation. He had many firsts. But when you look at his legacy and what you have done and what you are doing, how are you different?
I think we're different. I think Sir Lyndon Pindling, as the first, will always be in a category by himself, because it had to take a very special person in the midst of a lot of ambitious, aspiring young political leaders. And if you think of all of the potential leaders in that party that he was leading, that Sir Lyndon Pindling had to be special to emerge, a special kind of charisma, a special kind of relationship with people. And so when people were able to look at the figurehead of a movement, they have to be inspired by that figurehead to follow him, even though the consequences could be dire for them. And so Pindling had those special qualities that have to be gifted. You know, it's a God-given kind of thing. So I'm different. I have the charisma. I have the ability for people to have confidence in me. I work as hard as he does. We receive the same kind of severe criticism that we have to go through as leaders of our particular brand of politics and our party. But I would like to think that I have benefited immensely from the fact that I'm one of the few politicians who's old enough to have been with the generation of the founding fathers and to have sat at their feet, to have watched how they deliberate, to have watched how they make decisions. But I think the most important thing is to see their love for country. That no matter what weaknesses they may have had, no matter what kind of politics they may have had, no one would ever deny that they had this incredible love for their country and was motivated by that. I have the same kind of feeling.
You know, I've been around politics long enough to know that there was a time, Prime Minister, when there were some people in the Free National Movement who wanted you to be leader of the FNM as well. Why did you not join the FNM?
Well, you know, I suppose I'm going to have to wait until I write my book, God willing, to tell the real story to that. But I sat and watched Orville Tenquest and Kendall Isis come into our law firm to speak with Ingram and to know that something was in progress there. But at the same time, there were others who were meeting with me, and others by name in large numbers who were meeting with me and who were claiming to have a clear majority of who would have wished me to become the leader. My wife and I met with Ingram at our home, and we had a real live discussion on the issue of whether we would join the FNM. And we decided that we would not join the FNM, that we were going to remain PLPs, and we'll remain in the position that we were in until such time as circumstances changed. We were both independent members, and he was making his move, so we said we were not going to go with him. I actually told Frank Watson once that, listen, I'm not coming on that side, so go and take care, Ingram, and do your best, and so forth and so on. Of course, I thought at the time that he was going into the wilderness, and little did I realize that Ingram was on his way to becoming Prime Minister in 1992.
Finally, in this segment, as we reminisce of your 40 years as a parliamentarian, what has politics done to your family life?
You know, the wonderful thing about today is that I'm getting to know my oldest son. I did not know him. I did not have time for him. I did not have time for family in those initial years of politics. I was just giving so much to public life. And so the first thing I want to be able to say is that I thank God that I've had the opportunity now where every morning he walks into my room and he tells me what's in the newspaper. We share an email address, what's on the email, and he brings me up to date with everything else. And so we've gotten to know each other and to love each other in a special way, to respect each other, and for me to be satisfied that in the event that something happens to me, I have someone who can succeed me very easily in managing the family. And you know, we have an Adam in our family, and therefore there has to be that clear understanding and commitment that there's a special person in the family who will always be a dependent. So my living long enough has enabled me to make up for what the inadequacies that presented themselves during my early stages in politics. My wife has had to put up with one hell of a lot, and she has to be a special person, and she is a special person. She's an incredibly brilliant woman and beautiful woman, of course, and she has been able to have wonderful jobs that was making more money than me, and was able to make a major enduring contribution to family. But I think, Randall, when I look back, is the unfairness that happens to politicians, the criticism that goes to the root of a family. I mean, my wife is not in politics, and there were on occasions when they would come and describe her in terms of her own life as lacking the integrity in marriage. And it's so unfair to a woman who is so infinitely faithful and strong in her commitment to family life and her husband. Your daughter, the same thing, you know, and you try to see it where they say things about them, and that is totally untrue. I mean, you know, they said that my daughter was in some kind of program for recovering addict or something of that kind. I mean, and these are things that happen when you watch the family. And I remember my mother one day after the 92 elections crying and telling me people came before her house and was shouting obscenities at her. And you know, you come to accept these things. So in public life, you know, you're hoping that one day we will mature as a country, and the criticism will be in context of what you're doing or what you're not doing, and it wouldn't be so personally driven and so angry and venomous in its intent. But listen, when you've been around as long as I have, you develop a very hard skin. And in this particular case now, in this movement of winning in 2012, I am absolutely determined to be a transformative Prime Minister. And there is no doubt in my mind. I know what I want to do. I've led my government in what I want to do. I'm getting them to agree with me, and when they have wonderful ideas that challenge my ideas, we compromise in the right way. And so the Bahamas can expect that the sum total of the experiences of Perry Gladstone Christie over these 40 years in public life will be reflected in every degree in the coming years in this country as a result of the work that will be done by this government, my government, in this term.
Prime Minister, let's take a break here. When we return, we are going to talk about some of the things that you are doing now, and we want to talk about some of the challenges that we have in the country. Some of the questions are going to be difficult, I promise you.
Okay.
Let's take this break here. We'll come right back.